My name is Clara, 41 years old, a lecturer in business administration at a university in Denver. My husband, Lucas, and I had been together for 17 years. To outsiders, we were the perfect couple. A cozy home in the suburbs, 2 stable jobs, annual vacations like clockwork. But that glossy surface had been cracking for a long time. I just didn't want to see it. That evening, Lucas was in the shower. The sound of water running echoed from the bathroom, a backdrop to something else. A small ping from his phone, carelessly left on the nightstand. I'd never been the type to check my husband's phone. Trust was something I always protected. But intuition, that vague instinct you only believe when the pain cuts deep enough, pulled me up from my seat. The screen lit up, the notification was chilling in its simplicity. Table for 2 confirmed at Lumiere Friday at 7:30 p.m. Window seat as requested. She'll love it. I stood frozen. Lumiere was one of the most expensive restaurants in Denver. We had once dreamed of going there for our 10th anniversary but canceled because he had a work trip. I had never set foot in the place, yet now Lucas was planning a romantic evening there. For someone else? I didn't plan to unlock the phone, but my hand moved before my mind could stop it. The passcode was still our wedding date. Just 4 digits. As simple as I once believed marriage to be, what I found was an entirely different world. Messages, photos, notes, even full conversations spanning almost a year with someone named Sophie, a young blonde woman who worked in the communications department at the law firm where Lucas was a partner. They chatted daily, no, hourly, about the most intimate little things from morning coffee to the dress she wore at night. And photos from a 2-day work trip to Santa Fe. Sophie curled up in Lucas's arms, his smile so bright I barely recognized the man who once stood by me through the financial crisis in 2008. I still remember how it felt, like the air had vanished from the room, replaced by a piercing metallic ringing in my ears. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, to scream. But I stood there, knuckles white, heart pounding wildly. "Have you seen my blue tie?" Lucas called from the bathroom casually, like everything was fine, like he hadn't just torched our marriage with a dinner reservation. I placed the phone back exactly where it was, burying the eruption inside me. "Second drawer," I replied, my voice flat and cold. That night, I lay beside him, back turned to Lucas, listening to his steady breathing while my body stayed taut like a drawn bow. How many times had I told myself his distance was just work stress? How often had I pretended not to notice him, avoiding my eyes, making excuses to come home late, carrying unfamiliar perfume and suspiciously crisp shirts? Now I knew. Every suspicion, every gut feeling had been right. And I was no longer the blind wife. The next morning, I still kissed him goodbye like always. "Good luck with the Japanese clients this morning," I said, and Lucas nodded, completely unaware that I had already seen the candlelit dinner plans he made for Sophie on Friday night. Once the door closed behind him, I picked up my phone and called HR at the university. I requested a 3-day leave. I needed time. Not to cry, but to prepare. I had spent 17 years being the perfect wife, but now I was going to be someone else. I sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee gone cold, feeling hollow. In less than 12 hours, the world I had trusted had been stripped bare. But instead of collapsing, something else began to take shape inside me. Sharp, calm, and terrifyingly clear. I didn't want a screaming match. I didn't want to be the woman who smashes plates and yells in the kitchen, only to be met with pity and another robotic "I'm sorry." No. If Lucas wanted a special night with Sophie, he'd have one. Just not the way he imagined. I redoubled Lucas's email. His calendar was meticulous, as if he never expected anyone to find it. 7:30 p.m. Friday, reservation at Lumiere. Note clearly saying window seat, soft lighting, wine pre-arranged. A perfect evening for 2 people, with nothing to hide, except their spouses. I searched Sophie's name through his firm's employee directory. Sophie Walker, Internal Communications. It took less than 5 minutes to find her social media. Then, just one more click. Ethan Walker, Sophie's husband, an executive architect at a major design firm in downtown Denver. He had a warm smile and kind eyes. I didn't know Ethan, but I knew what betrayal felt like, and I thought, maybe he should know, too. Of course, I couldn't just call a stranger and say, "Your wife is sneaking around with my husband." I needed a different approach. Subtle, believable, and effective. As a university lecturer, I had one special privilege: inviting guest speakers for our seminars. So I crafted the perfect email, formal, concise, and completely professional. Dear Mr. Ethan Walker, my name is Clara Whitmore and I currently teach project management at Metro Denver University. We are hosting a speaker series on sustainable urban design and came across your recent work in the Rivergate Business District. If you're interested, I'd love to discuss the possibility of inviting you as a guest speaker. I've scheduled a dinner for this Friday at Lumiere 7:30 p.m. to talk through the details. It would be an honor to meet you there. I hit send. Less than 2 hours later, Ethan replied. Thank you, Ms. Whitmore. I'm very interested in this opportunity. Friday at 7:30 at Lumiere works perfectly. I look forward to meeting you. I read that line over and over, heart pounding with a strange mix of nerves and sorrow. He didn't know yet. But he would. Not through anger, but through the clarity of truth. The hardest part was next. Booking the table. I called Lumiere directly. Good evening, the hostess answered. We have a few tables left for Friday. Do you have a preference? A table for two near the window if possible, I said calmly, and if there's one available near the reservation under Hamilton and Rothman, ideally next to theirs, we're potential partners and would like to be nearby. A half-truth. And it worked. Certainly, ma'am, I'll seat you near them. Any special requests for wine or the menu? Just a good view, I replied with a small smile, though she couldn't see it. Friday night. Ethan and I would be seated just steps from Lucas and Sophie, close enough to see every expression, every movement, close enough to shatter the illusion they'd built in the dark. I hung up the phone and sat still for a long moment. Everything was ready. No screaming, no accusations, just a quiet, devastating reveal. Perfectly timed. Lucas always thought I was soft. He was wrong. And Friday night would prove it. I arrived at Lumiere 20 minutes early in a teal silk dress Lucas once said was too loud for dinner, my hair in a soft bun, makeup subtle, and champagne heels I'd never worn outside the box. Until now. I didn't dress to impress anyone. I dressed for battle. And tonight's battlefield was a 5-star restaurant lit by candlelight, the soft strains of a violin, and glimmering crystal glasses. The waiter led me to the reserved table, a perfect spot. From here I could see the window table, the one where Lucas and Sophie would sit. They hadn't arrived yet. I sat down and ordered a martini, my chest tightening. No matter how much I had prepared, the moment of confrontation still made it hard to breathe. Not from fear, but from finally facing a truth I had avoided for over a year. Clara Whitmore, a deep warm voice called behind me. I turned around. Ethan Walker stood there. Tall, dressed in a dark shirt with a polite smile. He looked exactly like his photos online, though his eyes were a bit more tired, maybe from work or maybe from what he didn't yet know was about to unfold. I'm really glad you came, I said, standing to shake his hand. Thank you for accepting on such short notice. The pleasure's mine. The topic you brought up really intrigued me, he replied, and took the seat across from me. We started with small talk about urban planning, education, and the role of sustainable architecture. I listened, nodded, asked questions. But my eyes kept drifting toward the entrance. Then they arrived. Lucas wore the gray blazer I gave him for his birthday last year. Sophie had on a tight red dress, walking confidently as if the world revolved around her. When Lucas pulled out her chair, they laughed together like they were starring in their own romantic film. Far removed from the real world, I tightened my grip on the glass and kept my tone steady as I continued speaking with Ethan. He was too kind to notice I was holding back a storm. I watched Lucas lean in, pour wine, his hand grazing Sophie's wrist. She smiled and tilted her head, the candlelight catching on her sparkling earrings. As I turned to grab my napkin, my eyes met Lucas's. He froze. His wineglass nearly slipped if not for the waiter catching it in time. Sophie followed his gaze and saw me. Before they could react, I turned back to Ethan. Excuse me for a moment, I said softly. I need to use the restroom. On my way, I planned each step. I didn't want a dramatic slap like in some TV drama. I wanted the truth, bare, cold, and undeniable. Just as I stepped out from the restroom area, I ran into Sophie. She froze, eyes wide. You're Clara, right? Her voice was barely above a whisper. I nodded. And you're the one holding hands with my husband under the table, while your husband is sitting less than 10 steps away. Her face went pale, lips trembling. Please, not here. Why not? I tilted my head, keeping my tone calm. Isn't this the perfect place? Candlelight, wine, soft music, everything set for a perfect performance. Claire, I don't want excuses, but Ethan deserves to know, doesn't he? I glanced toward my table, where Ethan was looking around with concern. He deserves to know who his wife is really having dinner with. Sophie turned as if to run, but Lucas was already behind her, his face white. Clara, what are you doing here? I looked at him, then called out, Ethan, could you come here for a second? Ethan approached, eyes focused. What's going on? I looked him in the eye. Ethan, this is my husband, Lucas, and I believe you recognize Sophie, your wife. The entire restaurant seemed to freeze in that breathless moment. Sophie covered her mouth as tears welled up. Lucas stepped back. Ethan turned to his wife, hurt written all over his face. I turned and walked away, leaving them in the chaos. But before I left, I added calmly, Oh, and don't worry, dinner's still on Lucas. His company card seems quite familiar to her. I walked out, head high, leaving behind full glasses, unsaid apologies, and 2 unfaithful people drowning in the truth they couldn't escape. When I returned to my table after that brief confrontation, Ethan was still standing, staring at Sophie, trembling in Lucas's arms. They both looked pale, like they had been yanked out of a beautiful dream and thrown into brutal reality. I signaled the waiter. Please, I said gently but firmly, I need a private room. And if possible, merge our table with that of Mr. Lucas Hamilton. It seems we have a few things to clarify. The waiter paused for a moment, then nodded. I'll arrange it immediately, ma'am. Within 5 minutes, we were ushered into a discreet private room. Soft lighting, the table set for 4. I sat down first, Ethan beside me. Lucas and Sophie sat across, stiff like students caught cheating on their final exam. No one spoke, no sound of chairs scraping, no clinking silverware, just distant music and heavy breathing mixed into the air. Lucas broke the silence. Clara? I don't even know where to start. Start 3 days ago, I said, pouring water into my glass, when you got the reservation confirmation and I happened to see it on your screen. That's when I knew. Both of them froze. Sophie looked down, and Lucas opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. I don't need a monologue. I read every message, Lucas. Every word, every photo, every secret trip to Santa Fe. Don't try to imagine what it was like reading that. I remember exactly how it felt. Sophie whispered, I'm sorry. I turned to Ethan. He's my husband, and she's your wife. The least we deserve is the truth, said to our faces. Ethan sat still, eyes locked on Sophie. What are you going to tell me? That it was a mistake? Or that you were just finding yourself? Because clearly, you've found quite a lot in the arms of another woman's husband. Sophie wept. I never meant for it to go this far. It started as a joke. I felt lost, unappreciated at home. Lucas, he listened to me. I listened too, Ethan said, voice shaking. I spent entire weekends reworking your office layout. You said you wanted a space that inspired creativity. I believed that. Lucas turned to me, voice trembling. Clara, I know I messed up. I destroyed the most valuable thing in my life. But please, don't let this be the end. I smiled, not gently. It was the smile of someone who had weathered a storm and had nothing left to lose. Lucas, the end didn't start tonight. It began the moment you looked at Sophie the way you used to look at me. That's when you decided that wedding vows were just words, not a commitment. He lowered his head. Sophie turned away, tears falling freely. I pulled a hotel key from my purse and placed it on the table. I'll be staying at the hotel across the street tonight. I already booked it. Nothing surprising. Lucas, you're welcome to go home. if you still have the nerve. I'll return Monday morning. It'd be best if you weren't there by then. Lucas panicked. Clara, please, don't do this. I'll do anything to fix it. You can't fix a house that's rotten at the foundation, I replied. I used to be the kind of woman who always forgave. But now, I've learned that sometimes forgiveness is just betrayal of yourself. I stood, adjusted my dress, then turned to Ethan. I'm truly sorry you had to find out this way. He nodded silently. Thank you for showing me the truth. It hurts, but I needed it. I looked at the other two one last time. I wish you both luck, not because I forgive you, but because everyone pays for their choices. Sooner or later. I walked out of Lumiere without looking back. The sound of my heels echoed sharply on the stone path, cutting through the still night air of the upscale district. In my hand was a small clutch, holding the key to room 1203 at the Celeste Hotel. A suite overlooking downtown, where the lights never go out, even when the heart already has. When the front desk greeted me with a professional smile and handed me the key card, I nodded silently. Inside the room, I locked the door, slipped off my heels, and walked to the large window. The amber lights of the city reflected against the glass, casting my silhouette onto the wooden floor. For the first time in years, I saw myself clearly. Without Lucas beside me, without any shadow hiding the loneliness that had long slept inside me, I sat on the edge of the bed. Then I cried. Not the movie kind of sobbing, and not silent tears either. It was a surge of anger mixed with pain. Raw, harsh, uncontrollable. I cried for 17 years of youth. For nights waiting by the door. For lies wrapped in flowers and wine. For all the times I thought I was loved, when in truth I was just being slowly replaced by something younger, newer, more temporary. I don't know how long I sat there. I only know that when the knock came, I was still hugging a pillow, eyes burning. I walked over and peered through the peephole. It was Ethan. I opened the door slightly. He wore a long coat, hair slightly tousled, exhaustion etched across his face. I'm sorry to bother you, he said, voice hoarse. I didn't know where else to go. I opened the door wider. Come in. We sat in 2 armchairs by the window. Outside, cars kept passing by, as if the world hadn't cracked wide open tonight. Ethan was silent for a moment, then sighed. I still don't understand how you knew everything and managed to sit through dinner like that. I gave a soft laugh. I didn't sit still, I waited for the right moment. Some truths, if you let someone else say them, they lose their weight. He nodded. Thank you for not letting me keep living in a lie. We talked like 2 strangers who shared the same wound. He told me Sophie was the first person who believed in his wild designs, and he had thought, if anyone got him, it was her. I told him Lucas was the one who slipped the wedding ring on my finger in the rain, promising never to lose his way. We were both wrong. I think I'm going to file for divorce, I said, my voice hollow. Ethan looked at me, unsurprised. I don't think I can live with someone who can pretend that well either. I looked him in the eye. I'm not angry at Lucas anymore. At least not the way I used to be. Anger doesn't last forever. But there's one thing I know for sure. I will never let myself stay in a relationship that chips away at my self-respect day by day. He was silent, then quietly said, You're stronger than I thought. No, I replied. I'm just the last one willing to look at the truth. That night, Ethan stayed in a separate room in the same hotel. Before he left, he looked at me and said, If you need a friend to get through this, I'm here. I nodded. Thank you, Ethan. Tonight I think you understood me better than my husband did in over a decade. After he left, I stood watching his figure disappear down the long hallway. In that moment, I didn't feel strong, but I felt lighter, as if, for the first time in years, I had set down a suitcase full of stones I'd been dragging for far too long. Lucas could beg, could promise, could write hundreds of apology emails, but my heart had closed to him the moment I saw the way he looked at Sophie. The way he used to look at me, and I didn't need anyone's permission to move on. I would walk forward on my own, with the same feet that had carried me through every storm. The next morning, I left the Celeste Hotel while the city was still wrapped in fog. I returned to the house where Lucas and I had lived for 17 years. Not to hold on, but to clear out what remained of a marriage that had silently ended long ago. Lucas was already waiting in the living room. He sat on the couch, hair messy, eyes red, shirt wrinkled and half-buttoned. As soon as I walked in, he jumped up. "Clara, we need to talk," he said, his voice cracked like he'd rehearsed it for hours. I set my purse on the table, calm. Then tuck. "I know I messed up. I know I betrayed you, and there's no excuse for it. But we can get through this. I'll do anything. Counseling. I'll cut off all contact with Sophie. I already told her." "She left the city," I cut him off. Lucas froze. "What?" "I heard from one of her co-workers. Sophie quit her job and moved back to Santa Barbara this morning. Apparently, she couldn't handle the office finding out." He sank into the couch, hands in his hair. "You told everyone?" "Not out of revenge, but because I refused to live in the dark. I called your mother, Mark and Jenna, even your college friends, the ones you always tried to impress. I told them exactly what happened, that you cheated on me for nearly a year, hiding it behind fake meetings, disguised work emails, and kisses shared with another woman while I was cooking dinner waiting for you to come home." Lucas shook his head, panic rising in his eyes. "You've destroyed my reputation. Do you know what the company will think? What my friends will say?" I laughed, bitterly. "You care more about your reputation than your marriage? Then let me remind you, you destroyed it, not me. I just stopped protecting the mask you built." He stepped closer, trying to take my hand. "Clara, please. Don't do this. I love you. I really do." I stepped back. "Lucas, love can't survive in the shadows of lies. If you loved me, you wouldn't have called someone else baby while still holding me in your arms at night." He collapsed to the floor, shoulders shaking. "She meant nothing. It was a mistake." "No, Lucas. It was a series of deliberate choices. You had the chance to stop. Every time you texted her, made a reservation, walked out with a lie on your lips. But you didn't. And now I won't either." His voice cracked. "If you leave, you'll ruin my life." "No," I said, eyes locked on his. "I'll save mine." The following week was filled with Lucas trying everything to win me back. Calls, texts, flowers at work, even a 4-page email detailing his journey to clarity after that dinner. I didn't reply. I'd heard enough apologies in my life, and now I wanted silence to say everything. I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce. 3 weeks later, a close friend happened to see Lucas and Sophie at a cafe in the suburbs. They didn't look radiant anymore. 2 days later, I received his last message. "I tried to move on with her, but there's nothing left. She doesn't smile at me anymore, and I don't see you in her eyes." I didn't respond. A few days after that, I saw he had deactivated his social media accounts and temporarily stepped down from the board at work for personal reasons. A man who had once lived for appearances was now facing himself, with nowhere to hide. Spring came earlier than usual that year. I noticed it one Saturday morning when sunlight poured through the windows of my new apartment, casting warm streaks across the dark wooden floor. I was making coffee when my phone rang. It was Ethan. "Coffee at Tanner's?" he asked simply. I glanced at the clock. 9:12, I am in. "Give me 15 minutes, I replied, smiling. Since that night at Lumiere, Ethan and I, once strangers, now survivors of the same shipwreck, had stayed in touch. First, daily check-in texts, then regular weekend meetups. No pressure, no expectations, just two people who had lost everything, slowly learning how to navigate the world again. That morning, he was waiting at our usual table, notebook open, 2 lattes already ordered. "I guessed right, didn't I?" he smiled, sliding one toward me. "I'm starting to think you're the only one who remembers what I like," I said, taking a sip. "Lucas got my coffee order wrong for 17 years. We both laughed. Not the painful kind from before, but something lighter, calmer. "How have you been?" I asked. "Officially finalized the divorce last week," Ethan said, nodding as if to confirm it for himself. "Sophie didn't say much, just left a short note. I'm sorry for making you lose faith in love." I looked at him. "And did you?" He thought for a moment, then met my eyes. "No, because I'm learning to believe again. from scratch. But this time, not in promises. In small, consistent actions. His answer left me quiet. We didn't need to say more. In that silence, I knew we were walking the same path, even if we hadn't named what was growing between us. The next months passed in rare peace. I returned to teaching, enrolled in a weekend photography class, and for the first time, lived without the label of being someone's wife. Ethan, besides running his firm, began speaking at my student seminars. He never missed one, and each time he stood at the front, sharing his passion for design and humanity, I felt inspired all over again. One day, after a session, I invited him to my new place. Small, but filled with greenery and light. We had pizza on the balcony, watching the city shimmer. "Do you think we're changing?" I asked, pulling a knit blanket over my lap. "No," he said, turning to me. "I think we're returning to who we really are." I stayed quiet. His answer warmed my heart in a way I hadn't expected. One early summer evening, walking along the river after an outdoor concert, Ethan suddenly stopped and looked at me seriously. "Clara, I'm not in a rush. I don't want to push you into anything you're not ready for, but if one day you want to try again, not with another marriage, but just a relationship built on trust, honesty, and no secrets, I'm ready." I looked at him. His eyes held no pressure, only patience and sincerity. I smiled. "I'm not ready to love again, the old way, but if it's the way you described, starting from friendship, sharing, no hiding, then maybe I've already started, without even realizing." Ethan said nothing. He just took my hand, gently, without urgency. That hand didn't promise anything grand, but it told me if anyone was going to help write my next chapter, it was the man standing before me. And under the soft lights, with a breeze brushing over the water, I knew I was stepping into something quiet, imperfect, but real. And this time, I wouldn't have to sacrifice my self-worth to keep love. Because the person beside me had once shattered too, and now we were both rebuilding. From those very pieces. A year after that fateful night at Lumiere, I received an invitation to Professor Martha Benson's retirement celebration. My PhD advisor and someone I deeply respected. The event was held at Hotel Le Marais, elegant and calm, just like her. I arrived early, in a simple yet elegant navy dress, wearing my mother's pearl earrings. In my hand was a small gift-wrapped package, a rare book she'd often mentioned. I expected nothing more than a quiet evening of conversation, laughter, and old mentors. But the moment I stepped into the ballroom, I saw a familiar figure. Lucas. He stood near the wine table, thinner, with gray at his temples, still polished but without the arrogant confidence he once wore so easily. When he turned and saw me, we both seemed to pause for a beat. Lucas walked over, wine glass in hand. "Clara," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "I didn't think you'd come." "I didn't think I'd see you here either," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He gave a faint smile. "Professor Benson is the last one still in touch with me, after everything." I nodded. "She's someone who always sees the best in people." Lucas looked at me for a long moment as if searching for the right words. Finally, he sighed, eyes lowering. "I owe you an apology. A real one. Not because you need to hear it, but because I need to say it." I stayed silent. "After everything blew up, I lost more than I expected," he continued. "Not just reputation or business relationships, but my own self-respect. I tried to hold on to Sophie for a while, but it fell apart faster than what I destroyed with you." I looked at him. No anger, no resentment, just the feeling of speaking to someone who had long stepped out of my life. "I hope you find peace," I said softly. He nodded slowly. "And you? Are you okay?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'm rebuilding life on my own terms, and I'm not alone." Just then, Ethan walked into the room. He wore a charcoal shirt and understated blazer. When he saw me, he smiled, the one I jokingly called the light at the end of the tunnel. Lucas followed my gaze and nodded when he understood. "He's a good man," Lucas said. "You deserve a fresh start." I placed my hand over my heart. Once shattered, now whole. "Thank you," I said sincerely, and so do you. Just start again, only when you're ready not to hurt anyone else. Lucas stepped back, as if giving me space to move forward. That night, Ethan and I sat side by side at the celebration. We chatted with friends, took photos, and shared a slow dance under golden lights. No grand declarations, no scripted future. Just the quiet, honest presence of two people who had once fallen apart and were now rebuilding. Not from scratch, but from cracks healed with time and trust. As we left the party, I held Ethan's hand and looked up at the starry sky. You know, I said softly, there was a time I thought betrayal was the end. Ethan gently squeezed my hand. And now? I think it was just a break, a pause so I could turn toward a better path. And we walked on, without looking back. Because the past had been closed with forgiveness, the present was painted with trust. And the future was quietly unfolding in every gentle hand I held that night. 1 year after the storm, I was no longer the woman who gave up everything for a husband who betrayed her. Now, I am Clara, strong, steady, and free. I didn't just survive the pain, I found a new beginning built on honesty and respect. Betrayal once broke me, but it also led me to a better life. I learned to place my self-worth above blind love, and in the end, I chose myself, with no regrets. What do you think of Clara's choice? Was she too strong, or was it exactly what a woman needs to do to protect her dignity? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories.